Hello everyone, we're going live on YouTube and we're going live as well on TikTok. So last time I was speaking in Spanish and now I'm gonna be doing it in English just in case for other people to give the opportunity to other people to know about our history and about our indigenous ancestors, which there are a lot of people interested. And obviously this is focused for people from ancient Mexico, who are descendants from the people of ancient Mexico and ancient Central America. But I mean, anyone can see this. I mean, there's no issue. And especially if more people know about our history and our culture, our real history and our real culture, well, there may be a way of advancing things. So the topic I want to touch on today is the human sacrifices myth, and this is very, for me, it's pivotal, it's paramount, it's the thing that started it all, the myth. And I'm using the word myth because I'm gonna try and disprove some things that not only researchers and academia has said, but also from Spanish chronicles and the way they were mishandled or purposely changed in order to make us look bad. And you can see this from any European culture. Whenever they invade other cultures, they try to demonize. That's the way they do it. That's the way they handle warfare. And you can see all over European history, even since the times of Alexander the Great. He always thought that a lot of the Middle Eastern, what is today Middle Eastern and Asian nations and kingdoms, were barbarians, and actually they were far more advanced than what he thought in Macedonia. Now, in our case, we were conquered by the Spanish, and there was also an inside revolt against Tenochtitlan, against Mexico Tenochtitlan, the Mexica Aztecs. So, what the Spanish took advantage of, it's the inner strife, the division that there was within our people. So this is normal. Every people has divisions. I mean, you can go right now to Europe and they're all divided. Pro-Russians versus pro-Ukrainians, and this happens all over the place. And so when the Spanish came, they took advantage of those political divisions. Now, I'm trying to explain this because a lot of people say the Spanish didn't conquer us. And this is true only to the Mexica Aztec nation and the Triple Alliance, what we know today as the Aztec Empire. The rest of ancient Mexico, ancient Central America, and the Southwest United States, like California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, they were indeed conquered by the Spanish. And you can see by the names of places, by the names of the conquerors, and I mean, there's quite a plethora of evidence. I mean, you cannot argue about that. But Spain refuses to apologize to us because Spain right now, this is, I kid you not, Spain says they have nothing to apologize because they say they didn't conquer us, because they say we self-conquered ourselves. But I mean, the the power of the Spanish Empire was felt not only in Mexico and Central America, also in the Philippines. They went all the way to Japan. Actually, they touched base in Japan. But you know, the Japanese, I don't know if they knew, but after seeing what happened in the Philippines and in Mexico and Guatemala and the massacres that happened there, probably the Japanese made the good choice of keeping them away from their island. And probably, a lot of Japanese would be would have family names like Garcia, like Espinosa, and they would think about themselves as mestizos, as Hispanic or Latinos. But thankfully, the Japanese, they didn't go through all that. But a lot of us, like the Philippines, for instance, and Mexico and Central America, well, we were conquered. And the reason, the language is very powerful. And you can see a lot of people trying to go back to their languages. And because that languages create cultures and create the way of thinking. This is science. This is nothing to do with the left or the right. This is science. So I'm gonna talk about this human sacrifices myth. Now, someone is asking me on TikTok, why are we ashamed if they did sacrifice human? I mean, if there were human sacrifices of people. The thing is that the evidence, it's quite weak, and let me explain you why. I mean, you don't have to be a high-end scientist to realize the lack of physical evidence and the lack of written evidence as well. Now, let me explain you why. There were a lot of books written. Today we know them as codex or codices in plural. So these ancient books, I mean, if you can search any codex and you can see history written, you can see astronomy written, you can see a lot of cool stuff. I mean, you can see religious themes, calendar. I mean, I always talk about this obsession our ancestors had with calendars and synchronizing different calendars at the same time. And one after the other, we see a lot of books, of ancient books, of this of each codex, and there's no recipe or no manual or no instruction booklet on how to perform human sacrifices. But we do find even accounting books like the Codex Mixtecs. We can find astronomy books like Codex Madrid. We can find, I mean, a lot of them are history or genealogy based books, artistic, based on calendars, and even the way of writing, not only history but also stories, like the Mixtecs did on about the war that came from the heavens. So these stories portrayed in a really cool and awesome way. By the way, you don't see these huge numbers of sacrifices being shown. And something you study in communication is the way that you communicate is who you are. For instance, if you see let's get America, and you try to dissect America, the way they speak on the media, on, I don't know, universities, on the mall, on the streets, on the neighborhoods. I mean, it doesn't matter where in America, everything revolves around money. So you don't have to be a genius to understand that America, it's a highly capitalist society because of the way they communicate. Now, the other way around, if you go to North Korea, for instance, in North Korea, the way they communicate, not only officially, but also within the people, you can see that there's a grasp of power, that there's a lot of control, for instance. And, in order to see a Marvel movie in North Korea, it's like looking for cocaine in a Western society, in a Western country. I mean, it depends the way they communicate, and each people has a unique way. So if we go through the communication, I mean, I'm gonna go back to the evidence, but if we go by the way they communicated, like the way they constructed buildings and this quote unquote pyramids, and the imagery, the statues, so we don't see these. Like I always say, this I don't see any instructions, and they were a lot about school and thought and everything they could teach, even through public display of art, they would put. And you don't see anything. I mean, there's an interesting French book. Yeah, I guess it's French or Quebec or from Quebec, I don't know. But he theorizes, that's his idea, that the Mexica Aztecs, according to him, imposed a terror-like state upon people. Now, if this was true, you would be able to see it through public display or communication, like I was telling you about North Korea, um, and other state-like, police states around the world. And so you don't see that. And now someone's commenting on. I'm also doing TikTok. I'm doing YouTube. So there's someone saying, "I believe there were human sacrifices that were another warriors that were caught." I'm gonna talk about that, but that's not human sacrifice, by the way. That's execution. But I believe was no different from normal war. It just depends where the enemies were killed. I hope it makes sense. It does, but it's the wording. It's what makes me, jumpy. Because one thing is a human sacrifice. It's putting someone, killing someone, in honor of gods or in honor of, like Mel Gibson and the like say that we used to kill people because we were afraid there was no another the sun was not gonna come up again. So that's idiotic. But I'm gonna talk about it later. Well, let me talk about it right now. So last week I was talking about how warfare, and you can see videos on YouTube about this, that I talk about how warfare was not about killing themselves in battle. I mean, there was a battlefield. And I was talking last week about famous female warriors. I mean, there were incredible Mayan and Mixtec female warriors, and Central American as well, Yucatan, Oaxaca, and even the Mexica Aztecs had a lot of female contingents, if you will, like units within armies of female-only warriors, and we saw that in the war against well, not only Chalco, but also whenever in the different campaigns done for Azcapotzalco. But anyway, so warriors fought in this battle not to kill themselves, but to capture the enemy. And the way of thinking is that I'm gonna capture as much enemies as I can, like today, no, like making points for a video game. Because in the Mexica Aztec army, the way of going upward within the hierarchy was the number of captives you had. It was not politics. It was no corruption like today in Mexico. It was not about who was stronger, like in a lot of Central American nations right now. No, it was more about how many captives they had. And that's the reason why a lot of female warriors rose even to the level of general, at least in the Mayan, in the Mayan lands. We don't have a lot of specifics in the Mexica Aztecs, but in the Mayan side, we do have a lot of women who rose to the level of general. Now, so briefly, they took their captives, either one, two, whatever. So once they have their prisoners, their prisoners of war, they didn't kill them in the battlefield. So now they're theirs. And generally speaking, the fate of these warriors would be an honorable death, a death that would mean something to them as warriors. And you see a lot of today dying in battlefield, but back then it was not about dying in battle, but once you're captured, your captor will give you an honorable death. Now, this was general, like the general idea, but there were some people, and we have again evidence, which actually there were some people that said, and we saw that from Queen Huachanil Ahau, Queen of Naranjo, Mayan queen, powerful warrior, and even though she was a woman from an early age, she was a great warrior. And what she did was actually really interesting. I mean, if you wanna, because she had a lot of enemies. I mean, kings that were her enemies. She captured them, and what she did is that instead of giving them an honorable death, she kept them and paraded them every time there was like a special occasion, like a, I don't know, a birthday party or whatever. Uh, I was gonna say a quinceañera, like something like that. Like, oh yeah, so this is our party. Thank you for coming. Here are your favors. I don't know. By the way, remember I captured this king and the other king, and they would be paraded, which a lot of female warriors found more insulting. Instead of giving them an honorable death, they said, you know what? You were so tough with me, and I hate you so much that instead of giving you an honorable death, I'm gonna keep you all the way till you survive. So if you see this mentality, and this is not just from Wat Chanila How, you see it from a lot of people, yeah, and you see it in Coba, you see it in Calakmul, and you see it in a lot of places in Mesoamerica. You start to wonder, where's this obsession about human sacrifices? Where is this obsession for killing people per se? And what academia says, this is what academics say, leftists, liberals, by the way, Democrats, this is what they say. They say that we killed thousands of people probably each day, especially in Tenochtitlan, the high capital of the Mexica Aztec Triple Alliance. And so they talk, these academics, about these massacres, like daily massacres occurring like daily. And they talk about thousands, I kid you not. And you can check what they say, the research papers, quote unquote research papers, because they look more like they're trying to satisfy an agenda or a status quo. I don't know, because the evidence is quite shaky. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because academia is basing their uh, their knowledge in hearsay. And this is no Johnny Depp situation. This is basically hearsay, like textbook hearsay, because when the Spanish came, that's what not only Hernan Cortés but a lot of people started to say to Europe once they were captured for corruption. And a lot of people either ignore this or they don't want to talk about this. But the Spanish crown actually, held Hernan Cortés accountable for a lot of corruption, a lot of situations that the Spanish Empire say, you know what, you did this against my will. I never gave authorization about this. So there was a situation where Hernan Cortés and his cronies wanted to defend themselves from what happened. If you see the Iraq War, especially the recent one from 2003, when they invaded just after the Twin Towers event in 9/11. So America went to war with Spain and with England, with United Kingdom too. Afghanistan, and then they form another coalition to go to, along with Australia and Canada, to go to Iraq. So after not finding weapons of mass destruction, after not finding this idea of what they thought was Al Qaeda, so they started to twist stories. They started to, you know, uh, put fingers at other people, and that's what Hernan Cortez and a lot of people, well, the conquistadors, did. And basically, the boogeyman were us, and they did all those horrible things, like for instance Alvarado making that massacre in the Toshkat massacre. What they were basically drunk, the Hispanics, because the Hispanic means Spanish. So the Hispanics were quite drunk. They were, I don't know, out of their senses, and they committed one of the worst massacres. Not only that one, there was also another massacre in Cholula, were instigated, by the way, by Malinche. Hernan Cortez goes full throttle against Cholula, and a lot of children were put to death inside, women, old people, and you don't talk about those human sacrifices. And so, to respond to this question in YouTube, uh, for the skinny killer, he says, I may be run out. He's right. The thing is that I wouldn't call those human sacrifices, because if we call those human sacrifices, then Texas is the biggest state for human sacrifices, because in Texas you have death penalty, and that's another situation. Back then there was death penalty, by the way, and that's history. And again, I'm telling you this because there were strict laws against crime. There were no cartels back then. There were no gangs. There were no crime, not even petty crime. Actually, the Spanish people, they were really surprised to see young girls, women, walking around in the around town, and they were really like, why is this happening here? I mean, back in Spain, usually women are raped, or killed or whatever, robbed. But they were really struck, the Spanish, about how people respected women, especially young girls, teenagers. So yeah, and if there were, I mean, I've never said we were saints or we were people who never committed a crime, never, like in the 5,000-year history of the Anahuac, of Mesoamerica. I mean, whenever there was a crime, let's say rape, it's death penalty. Is that a human sacrifice? I mean, it's an honest question. And this question is not to you personally, but to the academia people, to the media, to Hollywood. I mean, you see the Mel Gibsons. You don't see the liberal Hollywood crying about this and making a show on stage at the Oscars. I mean, liberals. That's the reason why I'm not a liberal, because they have an agenda that stems from their European culture and their European heritage. After all, the left was born in Europe, just as the right was born in Europe. So again, there's this idea of forces, political forces, media forces, even commercial forces. I mean, if you see the way ancient aliens books, novels written by the Europeans, and when I say Europeans, I say European American people, because I mean, if I say American people, anyone can be an American people. I'm talking about European Americans, and I'm talking about other Europeans as well, that they are obsessed in TikTok. I have an image of the Chichen Itza pyramid, beautiful, beautiful pyramid. So they say over here in the top of the pyramid, we killed thousands of people almost every day. This is academic people saying, researchers, like researchers with their thick eyeglasses and, talking like that. I'm an academic professor, and they kill themselves like up here every day. Where's the evidence? I mean, you would see corpses mounted or diminishing towns, number of towns. Mathematically, it doesn't make sense. And like Spock says in Star Trek, everything is about math. So, if you kill thousands of people, let's give him hundreds, just hundreds of people. Forget thousands. If you kill hundreds and hundreds of people daily in pyramids, in each city, in ancient Mexico and in Central America, which is Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua. Where do these people come from? Like mathematically, do they clone them? I mean, there would be a vastness of people disappearing, towns disappearing, entire cities disappearing, and you don't see that. One of the things Spanish people saw were a lot of people, and they were also struck by the number of people, so much so that they compared the Tlatelolco market, which was the greatest market probably in the entire world at the moment. They compared it to Bizancio, to the Turkish market, which they knew. That's what they knew, the way they can compare things. So when you see those Arab markets they're bustling with people everywhere. And Spanish compared our markets, Tlatelolco markets, all the places they visited, with a lot of people, highly cosmopolitan places with a lot of people, high numbers of people. So where did they got the mathematical numbers to kill hundreds, if not thousands of people? I don't know. I mean, the math doesn't add up. And that's how academics say. That's how, I mean, Hollywood handles it that way, and you don't see them crying about that, and you don't see liberals cutting their veins. I mean, tearing their clothes, and oh, poor Mexican people, they're erasing their identity. Because, by the way, I think, this is my theory, this is my way of seeing things, that this myth, this situation of making us human sacrificers for thousands of years, apparently we didn't have anything else to do. I mean, the Vikings were just battling. They were just battling in warfare. The Spanish, I mean, I actually don't know what the Spanish did, because they had to have the Romans come and build roads and what have you, buildings. And then the Arabs, they had, again, universities, hospitals. And the Arabs, the Arab people, when they conquered Spain, they said, these were people living in mud. That's what the Arabs say. I'm not saying it. That's what Arab accounts say. Spanish people lived in mud. I had to come and create a civilization for my people, in Sevilla, in Cordoba, which were places where Arab people installed their palaces and their universities and what have you. So, yeah, when you compare what Europeans were doing, it's pretty, I mean, Russia was pretty much a swamp, as well as the Ukraine. And yeah, so anyway, and Germany didn't even exist. I mean, so when you see this compared to ancient Mexico, where there were full developed states, and thank you so much, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I love, even though I'm not a Star Wars fan, by the way, I'm a Star Trek fan. By the way, I'm transmitting not only on TikTok, also on YouTube. If you want to support me, you can follow me on YouTube. Please give some likes and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Anyway, so you see, highly developed kingdoms, an organized society. You know, there was no clash of social hierarchies or social divisions like today we have with the left versus the right, the poor versus the rich. Back then there was nothing like that because there was a societal balance. And I'm not saying there was no poverty per se, but when you see the glory and majesty of those places, at least there was no misery like we have today in many places of Mexico and Central America. I mean, and like I was saying, there was no crime, rampant crime, at least like today we have with cartels and gangs. Again, because crime was punishable by death sentence. And like I was telling you about, a death sentence, it's not a human sacrifice. If so, Texas, it's an amazing state of the United States of America for human sacrifices. And you don't see CNN, one of the oh so liberal media talking about human sacrifices in Texas. No, that's the reason why I talk about that hypocrisy. So anyway, 5,000 years, 5,000 years of written history, just written history. 5,000 years, not 1,000 years, no, not 2,000 years, not 3, not 4, no, 5,000 years of written history since the times of the Olmecs, since the time the Miche Soke started writing. And not only, I mean, they were no petroglyphs, no, they were actual documents, laws, history, astronomical observations, and mathematical calculations about calendars. Facts. Thank you, Popol Kotik. Mr. Vera, you should have more views, carnal. Well, what can I do? Yeyi's Craft Shop. She agrees with Mr. Vera. Okay, so I'm transmitting on YouTube as well as TikTok. But if you want to support me, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. That really helps me. You have no idea. And not only for these kind of videos, but also for my AI recreations I do using artificial intelligence to recreate the images of ancient statues. And these are ancestors, basically. They are our ancestors. And yeah, so you have 5,000 years of history. Like I said, not 1,000 years. No, 5,000 years. The US, just America, I mean, if you take America, it barely has like 2 centuries and a half. You know what that is? I mean, not even 3 centuries. 3 centuries means 300 years, by the way. I'm not talking about 300 years. I'm not talking about 800 years. I'm talking about 5,000 years of written history. And in that written history of thousands of years, not once, twice, not thrice, 5,000 years, you don't see any evidence of written communication talking about how to perform human sacrifices, about how we should kill a lot of people, thousands of people, because what the hell, Spock? Math doesn't matter. Yeah, well, like I said, so math doesn't add up. History doesn't account for it. So a lot of people, especially 4chan kind of people, say, okay, but we have this ancient codex which shows Aztec people, Mexica Aztec people, performing human sacrifices. Especially the famous one is the heart, taking the heart out. That's the famous one. Um, those books were made after the arrival of the Spanish. You can check that out. And I've heard a lot of people trying to disprove me, but whenever I send them to check the dates of those books, of each of those codex, they don't say anything. I mean, and again, I'm gonna tell you again. Prove me there's a codex talking about thousands or even hundreds or even dozens of people being killed daily in each high capital for hundreds and thousands of years, because that's what the Spanish said. That's what the Spanish came to do to save us. Oh, poor souls, we needed to be saved by people who believe volcanoes can be turned off. Have you heard that? So there's this Spanish lady say on Spanish media in Spain that she wanted to know how to turn off a volcano. That's the people who conquered us. I mean, so yeah. And comments say Adela Hinelli, exactly. I've been saying this forever. David Garcia, hi from Veracruz. Veracruz, such an ancient place. I mean, Veracruz and Tabasco, both, especially South Veracruz, that's where civilization rose for us with the Olmecs, the written history. And ever since 5,000 years ago, in South Veracruz, the Olmecs rose. You don't see, like I always say, these booklets, these manuals of how to do human sacrifices, but you do find a lot of information about different flowers, animals, calendars, genealogy, even maps. Not one map, not two maps, a lot of maps, a lot of them. Actually, a lot of people in Oaxaca are still, showing, what, my family has been keeping this huge map showing a lot of places from back then, a historical map made by linen cloth from the time. So you see all that. And Obi-Wan Kenobi. Isa's snack. No, he's saying that it wasn't in a mass scale. Okay, he's trying to say that I wasn't talking about a mass scale as everyone is saying. Okay, that's a good question or comment or whatever. So what I'm saying is, even this is really interesting. Even if just one person was killed in honor of gods, monstrous gods, even if just one person, forget one person, a small girl, like the Spanish say, small toddler, killed in the name of horrendous monster-like gods, even if one was killed each year, that would mean we had human sacrifices. You want a secret? There's no evidence about it. You don't see any information. You don't see, when you go to the pyramids, when you go to Xochicalco, when you go to Calakmul, when you go to La Venta, when you go to Tzintzuntzan, when you go to La Quemada, Zacatecas, when you go to the pyramids of Nayarit, when you go to the pyramid of Tampico, Tamaulipas, when you go to Tenochtitlan, mighty Tenochtitlan, you don't see. We have to kill at least one person. I don't know. In Christmas time, I don't know, whatever. You don't see that. And you don't see that. So, let's see. Tony Concept, thank you so much. So, they sacrificed people, big deal. No, they didn't. Actually, the Greeks had human sacrifices. The Greeks. Have you heard about media talking about that? Or Mel Gibson? You don't see it. You don't see it. That's really sad. Really, really sad. By the way, you should do what Shika got sweet. I don't have my I how to read the eyeglasses there. But anyway, we should start learning Nahuatl. We should start learning our languages. For instance, I mean, I always say, I'm a descendant of not only the Mexica Aztecs but also the Purepecha and the Ñañu people, the Otomi. But we should start learning and going back, because I think, and a lot of people think, not only me, also Ireland, Quebec, uh, a lot of places believe language is identity, language is culture, and language defines people. So, if a lot of places like those areas in the world, huge, like I mean, industrialized people can do it, why can't we? Spanish is not our language. I mean, it doesn't matter if we speak English or Spanish or Italian. And yeah. So anyway, why don't I talk about Tonantzin? So I'm gonna talk about Tonantzin probably in another video. I'm preparing another video about Tonantzin, and I'm working. I actually finished on Coatlicue, how I recreated Coatlicue, and what else? What else? Yeah. So this is interesting. Nahuatl is not our first language. The Mexicas subjugated many nations, and they had their own language. This is correct. I was just talking about me. But you're correct. The Mexica Aztecs, what they did is, when they expanded the quote-unquote empire, which was the Triple Alliance, and not only the Mexica Aztecs, also Texcoco and Tlacopan, when they expanded, they carried with them their language. And that's why I'm saying language is so important, that it creates identity. And a lot of places, like Oaxaca, comes from Nahuatl, like Oaxacac, or Michoacan, again, from Nahuatl. But it's true that we also, because that's another thing a lot of Europeans say, well, you had a lot of wars and someone had to take over. Yeah, I mean, even here in chats, we can fight each other. So what? I mean, people are always gonna fight people. There's always gonna be dissent, which is a norm, by the way. I'm not talking about rainbows, butterflies flying, and unicorns and what have you. No, no, no. There's always gonna be dissent. There's like the Batman movie talks about these people, that like the Joker, that there's always people who's gonna do harm just because. That's true. And not only here, anywhere. So yeah, that's actually a good point to bring. So we had war, and I talked about earlier at the beginning of this video, there was warfare, but they didn't kill themselves at war. They captured, and then later took them with them to give them an honorable death. Now, that concept of honorable death, I don't know if that's human sacrifice. But what Mel Gibson and the CNNs and the media and academia and what have you, Ancient Aliens, History Channel, Discovery Channel, they all say, everyone's saying, we performed these human sacrifices, that we made these human sacrifices to appease the sun god. Like, no. I mean, we always knew the movements, not only about the movement of sun and the moon and Venus and other planets, but also the stars. And the reason I'm telling you this, it's because there were calendarical almanacs. You know, an almanac, like, well, I used to live in Texas. So in Texas, like yearly, you have these almanacs, and you take them to see, how the weather's gonna be, the moon, I don't know, the tides, what have you. So that, I don't know if there's any people from Texas, but in at least that's what I saw at my HEV. So uh, they already had those almanacs, and you can check them. The codex, each codex, like the Mayans, they had a lot of codex which like predicted where solar eclipses were gonna happen and when, which day. They had all these mathematical correlations because without it, I mean, they wouldn't know where the stars were or where to build certain sacred places. Okay, todo bonita. Mel Gibson. Yeah, I mean, I don't know the deal with Mel Gibson, and for some reason, Hollywood gave him a pass. And you don't see people canceling like they try to cancel, I don't know, even Amber Heard. I mean, the best choice. Fighting is a beautiful thing. Combat is necessary. Life is a struggle. Tony Concept. So it was all a lie. JJ's Craft Shop. It was. There is no evidence of human sacrifices. Obi-Wan Kenobi, San Antonio, Texas here. Hello, San Antonio. Yeah, I've been to San Antonio, Fredericksburg, and Aquarena Springs, San Marcos, what have you. Yeah, basically, and well, I used to be in Laredo, so they say names. Angel Iparraguirre. Names of language is an individual choice, so changes can't be forced. But misconceptions and straight up discrimination for native identity exist, and that is a big problemo. Yeah, that's a good opinion. I mean, what he's saying is what happens when someone enforces a language. I mean, I'm just not just talking about Spanish language being enforced, but what happens if, for instance, I try to enforce you Nahuatl language or Ñañú language or Purepecha language? So I don't know. I mean, in Quebec, at least in Quebec, they are forcing through laws, I kid you not, to enforce French to be kept alive. At least the version of French they have in Quebec. But yeah, so we see what Angel is saying about how governments may take steps to enforce language because they believe, and that's true, language forms identity. That's true. That's a good question. Kenty vibes. Were brujas doing sacrifices? OMG, that's a really good question. I mean, it's not Halloween yet, but I'm gonna try to answer. So, there were brujas. I mean, witches. Uh, Not witches with a broom flying. No, no, I'm talking about sorcerers, and a lot of history talks about it, and even the Mexica Aztec talked about Malina Xochitl, which she was so powerful, not only politically, by the way, but she had the power to control animals like spiders and nature, rain, the wind, and you see that also in the Tlaxcala region, in Amecameca, in Estado de Mexico, Chalco. Again, someone from Chalco was on TikTok saying hi. So hi to Chalco. And yeah, so there were duendes, but they weren't called duendes in Spanish. They were called, I don't know, cheneques, aluches. There were many names according to the region where these entities appeared. Now, this is not the topic, but I mean, if you even have Malacosa in South Texas and northeastern Mexico, along the Rio Grande. You have a lot of apparitions, even giant figures like Bigfoot, like appearing in the outskirts of towns. And you know, the thing is that whenever our ancestors talked about those entities, they didn't talk about them like, ooh, we're so scared about them, ooh, closed doors. No, there was actually a tradition. I don't know if ghost hunting would be the proper name. But there was a concept of ghost hunting, or I don't know, crypto hunting. I mean, hunting for these creatures and ghosts. Because according to them, to our indigenous ancestors, if you went after them and captured them, remember the idea of warfare I was telling you about? That people didn't kill themselves in battle, but after capturing them and taking them back to their city. So capturing a ghost, much like Scooby Doo, or I don't know, a Bigfoot or whatever, or a witch or a duende, whatever, if you capture them, so our ancestors said this story about making them, giving them, like forcing them to give them some sort of a prize, if you will, or a treasure. That's the idea. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, we don't really know the. I mean, even though it's history about the way people thought, the way of thinking. It's not only the concept of how people perceive the world, but also the spiritual world. And I talk a lot about how they didn't have gods per se. There was this huge energy controlling or going through us and through the universe. Teotl, Teotl. But the thing is that there were ghosts and there were apparitions, these ghouls and monsters, which a lot of them went after them, tried to capture them and ask them for a price. I mean, way before Chuck E. Cheese, so I don't know. So yeah, that's the Aztecs have kings. Yes, I mean the name was Tlatuani, and Tlatuani means speaker. The person that speaks on behalf of. So they were rulers. You catch a duende and you make them give you their treasures. Yeah, I mean, I'm planning to do a video about it for Halloween. Um, it's gonna be really cool. Or people gonna really hate me. For some reason, people hate me. David Garcia. In Mexico are nawales. That's what I'm talking about. So what in America and Canada are known as skinwalkers or Winnebagos, something like that. Well, in Mexico, it's nawales. So it depends of the region. But nawales, when I talk about nawales, like I was talking about Malina el Xochitl, which is documented by the Mexica Aztec, and there were many more, like Netzahualcoyotz's teacher. He was a great, wise person, but also had the power to transform himself into wind. I mean, Wendigo is different. Well, I want to know the difference. That would be interesting to know if you can put more about that. I'm just making a reference of how nawales shapeshift into either animals or elements of nature, like wind, rain, thunder, and you have a lot of that in written history about our indigenous ancestors. Could you comment on my last post, please? I would love your opinion on this. What's your last post? So, okay. One thing I don't like about natives from Mexico, I'm from Mexico too. I'm reading, by the way. Our people that speak native languages will have Spanish names and be Catholic. That makes no sense. They also want to keep the language alive, but they have Spanish names and a Spanish religion. And he says the only thing that is left, if the language, it's the language they speak. So I believe they want to save the language, their names have to change, and the religion. So I'm gonna go a bit out of topic here because I just want to address that a lot of, I mean, again, what's indigenous? What's native? I consider myself native. I see myself in my ancestors. And problem is not just Mexico, but because of the US government saying that Mexicans cannot be natives because we don't practice or live, not only practice our culture or live in our communities. We're not native, and that's the reason we cannot go walking over the border like in the U.S. Canadian border. In the U.S. Canadian border, native people, I mean, they can cross over the bridge or walk across the border because there's a government situation that's talked about already. But in our case, you know, and so I, when probably he's talking about people still living in their communities, like in Chiapas, Oaxaca, Chihuahua, probably in Chichicastenango in Guatemala. So what he's saying is that they should keep their language alive. Okay, a lot of people are still talk their language, but they're afraid to do so because of bullying, because of the government making them less, because of people like us, high tech savvy people making fun of them, and there's a lot of people, mean people, that denigrate our own people. I mean, we're the same. Difference is they still live in their communities. I don't live in my community anymore, but the DNA it's the same. We're primos, we're brothers, whatever. Okay, so they still talk their language, but and a lot of people have talked about this. They don't report whenever there's a census or whatever. They don't report their language. And how do I know this? Because when I did a video about the million faces, 20 million faces, in remembrance of our dead ancestors from the colonial people, colonial Holocaust that we suffered. Uh, so I met a lot of people who gave a message in native language, in indigenous language, and a lot of people say, even people who live in New York, in New Jersey, but as well as people who live in Oaxaca or in Yucatan. And a lot of people don't want to talk their language because they're afraid of being bullied or because of business. Why? Because the lingua franca in Mexico is Spanish. By the way, Spanish is imposed by the Mexican government, by López Obrador. Yeah, leftist. But that's the way things are because of colonial inertia. That's a term I coined. And colonial inertia comes from way back when we were New Spain. And this continues in Mexico. The only thing is that they changed flag. And instead of New Spain, it's called Mexico. So people are looked down if they continue to speak indigenous language, and especially to do business. Like in Mexico, a good place to make business is Mercado Libre, or even in Facebook Marketplace, or in Facebook groups. So a lot of these indigenous people go there. By the way, if you wanna buy from them, that's really cool. You can go to the Facebook group. The Facebook groups they do. It's like how can I explain? It's like a great market, like digital market to meet a lot of people doing their traditional clothing. And I bought some from Chiapas, by the way. And you're not only helping people, but you're also learning about culture. And yeah, so basically between them, they prefer to talk to us in Spanish. And the sad thing is that a lot of Mexicans living in the US, they don't even speak Spanish anymore. So yeah, we're forgetting and forgetting and forgetting it. That's and yeah, so basically, and the names, it's really interesting. So I believe we're in a renaissance, just like back in Europe with Leonardo DiCaprio. I was gonna say Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, Michelangelo, which he painted the Sixtine Chapel. And I'm not talking about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm talking about the great Renaissance masters. They say, you know what? We should go back to our roots. Which roots? The Greek Latin roots. And when I say Greek Latin roots, I'm not talking about uh, you know about salsa or rumba, because Latin is from South Europe, from Italy, from Rome, the Roman tradition. So the Renaissance, what the Renaissance did in Europe was to take people back to their roots in order to become great, to become like their ancestors, their Roman ancestors, their Greek ancestors. My question is, can we be able to do the same, to have a renaissance of our own? I mean, back then, you didn't have academia. Oh, well, I mean, if you consider the church being an obstacle, probably they had yeah, probably the church would be an obstacle. So yeah. And Skinny Killer says, I believe we need a real native president like Duterte, the president of the Philippines. My opinion on politics is that the problem is not who rules Mexico or Guatemala or El Salvador or what have you. The problem is the system, period. I mean, the system which is installed all the way in Mexico and Central America, that's the problem. And that system was already, corrupt ever since the beginning. Like I said, when Hernan Cortez came, he started doing corruption. Back in the times of our indigenous ancestors, corruption, if there was someone doing corruption, death penalty. Yeah, automatic death penalty. We do not need politics. Not today's politics. Not politics with the current system, the Western system. Politics, what politics means is getting together as a community and deciding things. That's how our indigenous ancestors did a lot of things through the tequio. And I talk about that in a video in my YouTube channel about tequio, where people guided by there was a group of elite people guiding them on how to, just guiding them. But people built their own roads. People built their own cities. I mean, they didn't depend on big government or in electing, voting for someone. And yeah. So more comments. By the way, I'm doing a live, and not only on TikTok but also on YouTube, and you can support me by following on my YouTube channel. If you're not liking my videos or my live feed, please make me a comment. Doesn't matter if it's hateful. Is there a reason, El Cryptoxicano, is there a reason our people never want to speak on our nationality? Or I don't know what he means by that, but nationality means a nation, like Mexican or Guatemalan. That's a nationality. American, I don't know, Cuban. Those are nationalities. But then there's ethnicity, and ethnicity is more about culture and the way the culture functions and the way it sees itself and with the world. So I don't know if that's the question you were talking about. JG's Craft Shop. The problem is how you use technology. Well, it's the same with everything. It's because of technology that you're here learning about this stuff, by the way. Well, that's true. I mean, you can be against technology, but a lot of things, technology can help us. And one of the things a lot of Europeans say is, oh, if you don't like Western society, if you don't like European culture, stop using our, inventions. Stop using TikTok. And I was telling them, you know what? And that's a lot of people telling me that. And I say, okay, TikTok, it's a Chinese app, and the iPhone I'm using was invented by a Syrian who was adopted by Americans. And so, I mean, I don't see European people anywhere there, and a lot of European people actually just take over like corporate mergers, and like Elon Musk buying Twitter. He's not creating Twitter, but that's just an example. Um, I brought my daughter. Can you speak more about the Skinwalker version of the Nawal? It's called the Nawal instead of Nahuatl. Yeah, because Nahuatl is the language of the Mexica Aztecs and central Mexico. Nawal is the name of the entity, or the person who transforms himself or herself into an animal, a spirit animal, or even the wind, rain, water, thunder. There are a lot of stories, even told by Teochichimecas. Teochichimecas lived in the region of what is today Puebla and Tlaxcala, that border region. So Teochichimecas talk about that as well, and some kind of confrontation that happened also in Amecameca. Uh, there's a spring coming from atop the hill in Amecameca. In Amecameca, there's a hill, like a small mountain, just in front of the volcano of Popocatépetl. So on the top, according to the chronicles, there's a magical water fountain coming naturally, where it will give you, these fantastic powers. So those are stories. And again, you see those stories about nawales, skinwalkers, giant people like Bigfoot. You see a lot of thing about witches and duendes from our ancestors, but you don't see our ancestors talking about human sacrifices. You don't see like, oh yeah, I remember when Uncle Juanito was killed because our gods, our gods were so hungry because the sun wouldn't go up. We needed to kill also our cousin. You don't see that. You don't see those stories. And like I said, the way people communicate is the way they are. Like for instance, you notice how I do a lot of hand thing here. So that what does it say from me? It says that I try to explain a lot, and sometimes I get messed up in my head. A lot of ideas. But if you see someone swearing a lot, for instance, you see that he's a person who just wants to say whatever he wants. Either he's an honest person or he's an a-hole. So you can know how people are by the way they communicate. And actually, I did a study where uh, parent-child communication is so important that the way parents communicate with their children is not just by the way they talk, but what with things and actions they do. Like if your parent smokes, that's something he's communicating to his son or his daughter. So the bearded Jawer, that's a cool name. The Otomis, which I think he's talking about the Ñañu people, were sent to Jalisco to make Guadalajara. I believe, I mean, I don't question it because actually a lot of people from Tlaxcala and a lot of Ñañu Otomis were also sent by the Spanish to to make the cities of that we know today as Saltillo, Monterrey, Monclova. I mean, even places from Tamaulipas. So I don't. I mean, I believe so, but I will have to check that out because that's more about contact. Because in history, you have your Mexican history, so you have pre-contact time. That's the time before the arrival of the Hispanics, of the Latinos, which are the Spanish people, and then you have contact time, which is the moment from when they arrived all the way to our time. So that's we're living in this time, in contact time. So I'm more familiar with pre-contact. But yeah, I mean, Otomis and Ñañús colonized, quote unquote colonized. When I say colonized, is they went to inhabit and create the city of Saltillo. Uh, According to El Criptoxicano, according to international laws, nationality and language are key to prove one's freedom. You can actually check that out in the UN website. There's the Charter of Rights. I don't remember if that's the full name, and you can find what El Criptoxicano is talking about. That's true. That's true. Uh, I believe if only Zapata had chosen to be president, we wouldn't in this mess. I doubt it. El Criptoxicano. We should create our own treasury and Chicano Chamber of Commerce. I mean, yes, the idea of creating our own things are really good. So as long as it's not bastardized, like for instance, Univision or Telemundo, where you see how they cater quote unquote Hispanics, quote unquote Latinos, just for it, to funnel them for political purposes. Because after all, Univision and Telemundo are Democrats. I mean, so what we need is not them telling us how to get together and telling us who we are. We need us getting together and telling ourselves who we are. Is Crypto Chicano Hermano. Hello, I am from Malaysia. Hi, all the way to Malaysia. I would like to. I would love to visit Kuala Lumpur someday. I love all those countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore. But yeah, Malaysia is really cool. I'm willing to work from the ground level to build up these things for people. Now that's an interesting concept. I mean, we should not only find ourselves and search for our own identity and to give our children a legacy, but to what point can we work towards this renaissance? I made myself the idea that I will never see in my lifetime the full renaissance because of time constraints, because of political issues, of these situations we have. But at least I tried. And I believe I won't be alive, by the way. But I believe, like, probably in a couple of centuries, we may well see a full rebirth or renaissance, like in the TikTok image, something really cool. But at least I know in my lifetime that will be really hard. But if we don't, like this TikToker was saying, if we don't start right now and teach our children and teach our nephews and what have you, it's not forcing them into something, it's just teaching them. Let them be. Let them be. So they can search for all of this and so they can discover that our ancestors are not these savages doing human sacrifices and eating people out of the bone. No. I mean, no evidence of that whatsoever. So if they start discovering that and we start creating content, and from that content we jump to either grassroots organizations but also media, because what's the success of South Korean and Japanese culture? Their success is that they could package their culture within anime, within manga, the cartoons. Kiawitl7 says a really interesting question that I was waiting for. I'm almost done, but this is a really interesting question. What about the Zompantli? For people who don't know, the Zompantli It's a set, a rack, a wooden rack, if you will, giant rack, and in this rack they had a lot of severed heads, like that. And I'm making the noise. So in this rack, Tzompantli, that's what it means. It's a rack. So the rack has a lot of, like structures, beam structures like this, and within that structure you have a lot of heads. And the heads would decompose and have skulls. That's what we know. That's what it has been discovered in Tenochtitlan, in downtown Mexico City. Now, what is it? That's the good question. What is it? What I was talking about was that there was a death penalty, and that there was a death penalty for criminals. And that's the reason why back then there were no gangs and no cartels and no rapists and what have you, crazy people, shooters. Well, not shooters, because back then they would be with the arrows, but there were no murderers like we have today, murder rates. And when they were, because they were really strict with that, crime was punishable by death. So the idea, at least the oldest Tzompantli, is found. It's talked about in Zumpango. Actually, Zumpango, that's what it means. The town of Zumpango in Estado de Mexico. Zumpango, it's a town, really important town, by the way, located nearby Tepoztlán, Cuautitlán Izcalli. So I've been there. It's a beautiful, beautiful lake. There's an island, and the town is really nice, really calm. But Zumpango, what it means, it's place of the Tzompantli. So that's the city where there was a Tzompantli, a rack with skulls. And that's written. Now we have visual representation of Tzompantlis in Chichen Itza, in Tula, and other such places where we can see where Tzompantlis are sculpted. And that's why we know that they had Tzompantlis all the way to Chichen Itza. So what is a Tzompantli? Well, let me tell you what the Spanish saw, just to clear a bit, because I don't have all the answers, and there was no cameras to film, no phones, no TikTok to do a live stream of whatever they were doing in the Tzompantlis, like I said. And they discovered the Tzompantli in Tenochtitlan. But what the Spanish saw is that's what they saw. Believe it or not, that's what they saw. So during the skirmishes, the first skirmishes, they captured some horses. They captured some Spanish people. For instance, I'm talking about the what they call Noche Triste, what we would call Noche de la Victoria, victorious night, when Cuitláhuac, ruler of Tenochtitlan, defeated the Spanish. So the Mexica Aztecs defeated the Spanish and they pushed them out of Tenochtitlan. But in that battle, that was a victory for us. They captured horses and they captured Spanish. Okay? Later on, when the Spanish came back to siege Tenochtitlan, they found the heads of the horses in those skull racks. So you have the rack, huge, gigantic rack, and they were heads of the Spanish heads that they captured and their allies, and they also had horses. I mean, it was really interesting to see that, because that proves even further what I'm telling you about, that back then battles and warfare was done to capture and then to give an honorable death. Probably I don't know, but probably these Zompantlis skull racks functioned as a way of displaying the enemies they defeated. But again, I'm talking about what a human sacrifice is. Human sacrifice means giving the life of a human for a god or for a religion or for the sun to come up, or because, oh, we don't have any rain, let's kill the neighbor, or let's kill my ex. JG's Craft Shop. Sí lo habla, pero hace uno en español y luego uno en inglés. Hoy tocó en inglés. Sí, trato de hacer en inglés y en español. Ahorita tocó en inglés. So I'm trying to do English and Spanish. Today was English, and tomorrow is gonna be in Spanish. And like I said, probably gonna make a French one as well. But yeah, I mean, what I'm talking about is human sacrifice, like the Greeks killing their daughters to have the favors, to have favor from the gods, to have the wind in their favor, like in the Odyssey, Iliad and Odyssey. So again, of that, there's no proof. But if a lot of people, and that's really, every day I get this, like the Zompantli, the skull rack. Yeah, and we could talk about Texas. We can talk about Texas all day long. But how come no one talks about human sacrifices in Texas? How come they make a difference between human sacrifice and capital punishment in Texas? What's the difference? Just because we are savages from Mexico and Central America. That's the Fidel Striker, maybe showing a scene of Mayan scientists creating, let's say, corn and then bring it to current times. So even though many people have a hard time believing this, our ancestors created tomato, corn through agriculture way of mixing their genetics. So they domesticated, that's the word. Because someone told me, why are you saying domesticated? You can only domesticate animals. No, I'm talking about domesticating plants as well and fruits. So yeah, avocados, that's another creation made by our ancestors. So we have tomatoes, avocados, beans, chili, lots of variations of chile. We have corn, white corn, blue corn, lots of variations of corn, squash, pumpkin as well. And yeah, I mean, there's more. I'm forgetting right now. This is not the topic, but there's a lot of food that we created in the region of Puebla, South Tamaulipas, Oaxaca, Veracruz, where that the first food was domesticated. En Jalisco se desangraban poquita sangre y lo tiraban al lago de Chapala. What he's saying is that people from Jalisco used to bloodlet themselves just a little bit and throw the blood to the lago de Chapala. Okay, we have written accounts of bloodletting. Now that's a whole different thing. And last week I was showing you the image of a Mayan queen from Yaxchilan bloodletting herself the tongue in order to perform a ritual to reach a different conscious state. So that's why it's done religiously. It was done religiously back then. And we have evidence, written evidence, and we have, we even have monuments. We have huge monuments with Mayan queens at their knees doing the bloodletting ritual of passing uh, a thorny rope through the tongue. So that's evidence. That's evidence. But we don't see evidence of a guy like this, and another guy with the knife, like taking the heart, and yeah, look, you see, this is gonna happen to you on Wednesday. We don't see that, but we see calendars talking about what's happening the next solar eclipse and what have you. So anyway, gonna wrap this up. Thank you for following me, and keep following me if you wanna support me. Manuel Ramirez, keep making the videos, warrior. Tlazocamati. Qualitonality. So yeah, thank you so much for watching me. We're gonna keep talking about more of these and other concepts. All that I believe was created by los españoles, say and Michi. We can show floating elements over fire, genetically modifying corn. In one of these scenes, corn needs to be created with thunder and lightning announcing the birth of the corn. So a lot of comments. What time you holding class mañana? So tomorrow, probably a bit later, because I will be doing something around this time. Yeah, but a bit later. Just a bit later in Spanish. Tomorrow it's the same topic, but in Spanish. And well, I want to thank everyone on TikTok as well on YouTube. I'm planning to do more. You can follow me also on Twitter, on Instagram. My handle is at Macuilquetzpalin. Macuilquetzpalin. That's my handle in Instagram. But I don't really use Instagram right now. I'm YouTube and TikTok, and if you want to support me, please follow me on YouTube. Give me some likes, comments. Hatred is welcome. I mean, if you want to tell me whatever, I mean, it doesn't matter. If you want to talk duendes, please tell me, and I'll do more videos about witches and duendes and about corn and whatever you want. Okay, so thank you so much, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Thank you all the way to San Antonio, Texas. Go Spurs.